The camera lights blaze, the studio hums with tension, and then it erupts. Kellyanne Conway leans forward, her voice sharp, cracking with fury. She jabs her finger at the desk, her words tumbling over one another in a frantic rush, as if volume alone could disguise the emptiness behind them. Her face reddens, veins rising at her temples, the strain of a desperate performer who knows the audience is slipping away. She is not just debating, she is screaming, clawing for dominance in a room that refuses to grant it. Across from her sits Representative Jasmine Crockett. No flinch, no raised brow, no hint of irritation, just stillness, poised, focused, eyes locked on Conway with the quiet intensity of someone who has already calculated the ending before the scene has even begun. She takes a slow breath, her pen resting lightly against her notepad, and in that silence, something monumental is already happening. The cameras catch it, the viewers at home feel it. The split screen is a study in contrasts, one woman unraveling in anger, the other embodying a composure so firm it cuts through the chaos louder than any shout ever could. Conway rages, voice shaking, gesturing wildly, but Crockett's stillness becomes the louder statement. It is the silence of a storm about to break, the calm before the reply that will echo beyond this stage. The narrator's voice drops in, almost whispering, as though letting the audience in on a secret the screaming antagonist cannot hear. How did one reply? Measured, calm, deliberate, silence, an empire of spin. The studio grows tense. Viewers at home lean closer, phones already in hand, sensing something is about to happen. Conway's words are still spilling, but the power has shifted. It belongs now to the silence, to the patience, to the woman who waits. And then, just for a second, the camera freezes. Conway mid-shout, face contorted with strain. Crockett motionless, gaze steady, her calm radiating more strength than Conway's rage could ever muster. A freeze frame that says everything, the difference between noise and truth. The room doesn't know it yet, but history is about to be made. But this was only the beginning, the moment that would set social media ablaze. It wasn't just another panel discussion. This was prime time, broadcast into millions of living rooms, a moment when America itself seemed to lean in and listen. The networks had promoted it all week, a high-profile clash between a seasoned political operative known for her fire and spin, and a freshman congresswoman who, while respected in her district, was still largely dismissed by Washington insiders. The stage was set not just for commentary, but for theater, political theater with reputations hanging in the balance. Kellyanne Conway entered with the confidence of someone who had played this game for years. She smirked during introductions, tossing her hair back as if she were already certain of victory. To her, this was supposed to be easy, another opportunity to dominate the airwaves, bulldoze through questions, and leave opponents stammering in her wake. She relied on the same tools that had carried her through countless appearances, rapid-fire talking points, relentless interruptions, and the ability to frame her opponent as weak before they ever spoke. Jasmine Crockett, a woman underestimated not only by Conway but by much of the national media. Crockett wasn't flashy. She didn't play to the cameras. She was deliberate, steady, unshaken. In a world obsessed with spectacle, her calm became its own kind of defiance. And the stakes could not have been higher. This wasn't merely about two women trading words on cable television. It was about whose voice would define the moment. Conway represented an old order, an establishment of spin, aggression, and disdain for those who refused to play by her rules. Crockett represented something newer, something rising, dignity, truth, and the calm confidence of a generation unwilling to be shouted down. The moderators tried to keep order, but the imbalance was undeniable. Conway was louder, faster, more aggressive. She aimed her barbs not just at Crockett's policies but at her identity, her background, even her right to be sitting in that chair. Every insult was meant to rattle, to reduce her to silence. The calculation was simple: if Conway could strip away Crockett's composure, she could win the segment and the headlines that followed. But the cameras told a different story. While Conway burned herself out in a storm of fury, Crockett remained steady, her silence beginning to speak louder than the shouting across the table. Viewers could sense it. Social feeds lit up with early whispers: "Why isn't she taking the bait? This is powerful." The tide of perception was already beginning to turn. What made this clash matter wasn't just the personal rivalry. It was the symbolism. On one side, the arrogance of entitlement, a voice that believed domination equaled truth. On the other, the dignity of restraint, a voice that represented communities who had always been told to sit down and stay quiet, but who were now demanding to be heard. This wasn't a debate about policy points, it was a mirror of America itself, a question of what kind of leadership would define its future. As Conway's tirade reached its peak, viewers leaned closer to their screens. The nation's pulse quickened. People sensed they were watching more than a televised argument. Something historic was stirring in that studio. Nobody watching that night knew the reply about to come would rewrite the headlines. To understand the eruption that night, you have to understand Kellyanne Conway herself. For years, she has been a fixture on America's television screens, not as a neutral commentator, but as a warrior of words, someone who thrived in the chaos of confrontation. In the world of political television, she was both feared and ridiculed, a performer whose craft was spinning reality so fast that even truth seemed uncertain. Her reputation was built on combat. She would enter studios like a prizefighter, ready to dominate by sheer volume, quick wit, and a refusal to ever concede ground. Moderators often struggled to keep her in check, opponents frequently found themselves drowned out by her relentless interruptions. She was, in every sense, a showwoman, her rhetorics calibrated to command headlines. But beneath the sharp retorts and quick smiles was a record riddled with contradictions. She preached family values while defending leaders accused of undermining them. She demanded respect for institutions even as she mocked and undermined those very institutions when they failed to serve her side. She prided herself on intellect, yet often relied on empty slogans over substance. It was this duality, confident on the surface, hollow underneath, that made her both captivating and polarizing. Audiences had come to expect the same routine from Conway. The smirk before delivering a cutting line. The rolling eyes whenever an opponent dared challenge her. The way she dismissed facts with a laugh, as though the truth itself were too small to concern her. For her base, she was a defender, someone willing to say it like it is. For critics, she embodied the arrogance of power, a voice that twisted reality until even lies sounded plausible. There were infamous moments seared into the public consciousness. Interviews where she coined phrases that became memes of mockery. Late-night shows replayed her sound bites as punchlines, yet every time, she returned to the stage, louder and more defiant. Conway seemed to thrive on the outrage, as if the boos of her critics were fuel for her fire. In her world, attention, any attention, was victory. This pattern of behavior made her predictable, but also dangerous. She understood the mechanics of media better than most. She knew how to overwhelm, how to dominate a segment not by making sense, but by ensuring her voice was the one echoing longest after the cameras shut off. She played the role of antagonist so well that some wondered whether she believed her own words at all, or if it was always performance, always theater. And yet, that theater had limits. For all her practiced aggression, Conway was often blind to the shifting cultural tides. She underestimated opponents who did not play her game, who refused to rise to her bait. She was accustomed to rattling guests until they cracked, to leaving them frustrated and flustered. But when faced with someone who could absorb the fury and return it with measured grace, her tactics began to look less like strength and more like desperation. That was the dynamic building in the studio the night she went head-to-head with Jasmine Crockett. Conway arrived with the same arsenal she had wielded for years, rapid-fire talking points, overconfidence in her own persona, and the belief that aggression alone would carry the day. She dismissed Crockett before the cameras even rolled, expecting another easy opponent who would struggle under the weight of her verbal onslaught. But arrogance has a way of blinding even the most seasoned performers. In Conway's eyes, Crockett was a newcomer, untested, someone she could overpower with volume. She failed to see the resilience simmering behind Crockett's silence, the calculated patience that made her far more dangerous than Conway realized. For years, Conway had thrived in a world of noise. But now, She was about to learn what happens when noise meets composure, when spin collides with truth. But Conway had never faced an opponent quite like Jasmine Crockett. Jasmine Crockett's story did not begin on television sets or in high-profile debates. It began in the courtrooms and neighborhoods where she learned the meaning of patience, persistence, and principled courage. From the start, she understood that change is not handed down, it is fought for, earned through meticulous work, unwavering focus, and a refusal to be silenced. Her journey was built on grit, intellect, and a sense of justice that never wavered, even when the world seemed indifferent. Before the cameras ever captured her calm composure, Crockett was a lawyer. Not a flashy attorney chasing headlines, but a dedicated advocate for those whose voices were often ignored. She represented families facing systemic injustice, workers denied their rights, communities fighting for basic dignity. In every case, she listened first, absorbing the facts, the emotions, the stakes. And she responded not with theatrics, but with reasoned arguments, strategic precision, and a voice that demanded to be heard without shouting. Her activism extended beyond the courtroom. She was a presence in local communities, standing beside residents confronting inequality, educating citizens about their rights, and organizing initiatives that brought tangible change. Through these experiences, she learned to measure her words, to communicate power without aggression, and to remain calm even under relentless pressure. She discovered that strength is not always loud, that sometimes the greatest victories are won in silence, in observation, in knowing exactly when to act. Crockett's composure was not innate, it was forged in the crucible of challenges few could endure without breaking. She faced opposition from those who underestimated her because of her youth, her background, or her identity. She encountered prejudice disguised as civility, attempts to derail her focus, and moments that could have shattered confidence if she had not cultivated inner resilience. Each encounter strengthened her, teaching her that dignity and patience are forms of power that demand respect. Contrast this with Kellyanne Conway, whose tactics depended on overwhelming her opponents with noise and spectacle. Where Conway sought dominance through theatrics, Crockett built her influence quietly, through competence, consistency, and moral authority. Conway's aggression was designed to intimidate, Crockett's calm was designed to endure, to communicate truth, to create space for justice to emerge. In every interaction, the difference between them was stark, almost cinematic, one shouting to be seen, the other quiet but unyielding, a steady force in a turbulent environment. Crockett's rise was not accidental. It was the product of relentless preparation, of anticipating challenges, of cultivating an unshakable moral compass. She understood that leadership is earned through service, empathy, and commitment to truth. She valued listening as much as speaking, strategy as much as passion, and knew that moments of confrontation are won not by instinct alone, but by discipline and clarity of purpose. And yet, despite her achievements, she remained grounded. Humility was never a weakness for Crockett, it was a sign of her authenticity. She did not seek attention for its own sake. She did not aim to humiliate opponents. Her goal was justice, dignity, and representation for those who often went unheard. This quiet confidence, this refusal to be provoked into performative anger, would soon become her greatest weapon against Conway's relentless aggression. In her professional life, Crockett had faced many who tried to belittle her, to overwhelm her with authority or experience. She had encountered politicians, lobbyists, and opponents who assumed that youth and composure were naivety. But Crockett had learned early that patience is not passivity, that listening is not weakness, and that the right words delivered at the right moment carry more impact than 1,000 shouts. She had honed her craft in settings far more consequential than a televised debate, courtrooms where freedom, livelihoods, and rights were at stake, community halls where futures were being decided, neighborhoods where voices needed amplification. All of this formed a foundation for the moment the cameras would capture. Crockett's calm was not accidental, it was deliberate, informed by years of preparation and experience. She understood Conway's tactics even before the first word was spoken, and she was ready. Every insult, every raised voice, every attempt to provoke her, would meet a wall of composure she had built painstakingly, brick by brick, through a life of service and struggle. So when Conway tried to rattle her, Crockett did what she always does, she waited, and then struck. The debate intensified with every passing second. Conway leaned forward, voice sharp and rapid, slicing through the studio air with pointed interruptions. She mocked, ridiculed, and overpowered the conversation as if volume alone could establish truth. Her gestures were exaggerated, her smirk almost permanent, a calculated display meant to intimidate anyone who dared challenge her. She was the picture of aggressive dominance, a seasoned strategist who had spent years perfecting the art of theatrical confrontation. Across from her, Jasmine Crockett remained immovable. Every interruption, every jab, met with a steady gaze and subtle note-taking. She did not flinch, did not raise her voice, and did not allow Conway's theatrics to dictate the rhythm of the conversation. Her pen moved deliberately, jotting details, counterpoints, and observations, a quiet testament to control and preparedness. In her calm, there was a tension that spoke louder than any shout. Viewers could feel it, the difference between someone desperate to be heard and someone who already owned the moment. The moderators struggled to maintain order. Conway's interruptions became relentless, each one sharper than the last, her words a storm attempting to drown out her opponent. She leaned into the camera, eyebrows arched, as if to signal that any hesitation on Crockett's part was weakness. Every smirk, every laugh, was a challenge, a dare to break composure under pressure. And for a moment, the audience could almost hear the echo of her years in media strategy, the training that allowed her to dominate almost any televised debate. Yet Crockett's composure was magnetic. The tension in the room shifted subtly with every measured pause. Where Conway's words raged, Crockett's silence spoke volumes. The cameras captured it, a subtle narrowing of eyes, a deliberate posture, the calm rhythm of someone confident in her knowledge and purpose. The contrast was electric, one side frantic and overpowering, the other calm and resolute. The crowd, both in the studio and at home, leaned in, sensing that this was more than a clash of opinions. This was a collision of strategies, a battle between noise and poise, aggression and principle. Social media feeds began to light up in real time. Clips of Conway's tirade circulated with captions highlighting her intensity, but viewers couldn't ignore the stillness across the table. Every insult she hurled seemed only to underscore Crockett's quiet dominance. Crockett absorbed the chaos, letting each attack roll off her without reaction. She allowed Conway to expose herself through overconfidence, each mocking comment revealing impatience and reliance on theatrics over substance. The anchors exchanged glances, some nodding subtly, recognizing that the scripted aggression often favored the one who could withstand it, and Crockett was doing just that. By now, Conway's performance was teetering on the edge of desperation. The momentum was no longer hers alone. Viewers could sense the shift, the aggressor, so used to controlling the narrative, now increasingly on the defensive, while Crockett maintained her calm with quiet authority. Every interruption Conway made was met with a poised silence, a subtle, unwavering presence that drew attention not to the chaos, but to the clarity of the one refusing to be rattled. The tension was unbearable. Every viewer felt it, the studio held its collective breath, waiting for the inevitable breakthrough, the moment when the quiet, composed challenger would respond to the torrent of aggression with the force of truth. Conway's theatrics had escalated, but Crockett's patience had not wavered. And then, Crockett finally opened her mouth. The studio fell into a hush so complete it seemed to press against the glass of the cameras. Conway's voice, once a relentless storm of interruptions and jabs, began to falter as she waited for a reaction that never came. Crockett, seated with an almost statuesque calm, shifted only slightly, her pen poised above her notes, her gaze unbroken. Every viewer at home could sense that the moment had arrived, the instant when patience and preparation would outweigh theatrics and arrogance. She began to speak. Not loudly, not forcefully, but with a precision that cut sharper than any yell. Every word was deliberate, carefully chosen, measured in cadence and tone, landing like a gavel in the room. The first phrase was almost understated, a subtle correction to a misrepresentation Conway had just hurled across the table. It was not a rebuttal in anger, it was a statement of fact, delivered so calmly that the absurdity of Conway's earlier outburst was impossible to ignore. As Crockett continued, the rhythm of the room shifted. Her sentences unfolded logically, rhythmically, each point building upon the last. She layered facts with moral weight, framing her argument in a way that transcended mere politics. Listeners felt the gravity of her words. It wasn't just a victory in debate, it was a vindication of integrity, of voice, of composure. Every pause was purposeful, giving space for the audience to absorb the impact before she pressed forward. Conway's face, once animated with confidence and theatrics, began to show cracks. Her smirk faltered. Her hands, which had gestured wildly moments before, twitched uncertainly on the desk. The rapid-fire words that had served as armor now seemed clumsy, almost desperate. She leaned forward, attempting interruption, but Crockett maintained eye contact and held her hand up in a calm, almost maternal gesture, a quiet, commanding signal that her words would not be derailed. Across the studio, the cameras captured reactions that were instantaneous and electric. Anchors leaned in, some whispering to producers, others simply absorbing the clarity and force of Crockett's delivery. The audience in the room shifted, collectively recognizing the change in momentum. Gasps echoed softly from the sidelines, and cell phones discreetly recorded, poised to immortalize the moment. Social media, though delayed by seconds, began to ignite. Clips of Crockett's calm yet decisive words were already circulating, captions praising her poise, tagging the moment as unbelievable, historic, and mic-drop worthy. Crockett's strategy was a masterclass in control. She did not need to shout to dominate. She allowed Conway to unravel herself, turning every insult into a foil, every aggressive jab into evidence of desperation. When Conway tried to interject, Crockett's pauses, slight shakes of the head, and deliberate emphasis silenced the room. It became clear that the power was no longer in volume, it was in the command of truth and the authority of composure. Every phrase Crockett spoke layered the narrative of hero versus villain. Conway, with all her experience, all her media savvy, became a cautionary spectacle, the embodiment of arrogance and the consequences of over-reliance on theatrics. Crockett's calm dismantled not only Conway's arguments but her credibility, the confidence that had carried her through countless debates and appearances now crumbling under the weight of undeniable reasoning and moral clarity. The audience's reaction grew more visible, even within the controlled environment of the studio. Some whispered among themselves, others leaned forward in shock, and many silently nodded, as if recognizing a truth they had long hoped to see spoken aloud. The tension that had built throughout the segment transformed into awe. This was more than a rebuttal, this was a moment of vindication for anyone who had ever been underestimated, dismissed, or shouted down. Crockett's delivery was cinematic in its effect. She timed each breath, each inflection, to ensure maximum impact. The pauses between her sentences allowed the significance of her words to sink into every ear and screen. She maintained her eye contact with Conway, not as an act of intimidation, but as a testament to steadfast confidence. It was a quiet dominance, the kind that leaves no room for counterattack, the kind that transforms silence into power. As the exchange continued, Conway's gestures became less coordinated, her voice pitched higher with frustration. The earlier aggression that had seemed so commanding was now a hollow echo, a shadow of authority that Crockett had methodically dismantled. Social media reactions intensified, hashtags began trending, clips of the moment were shared millions of times, commentators dissected each line of Crockett's response, and pundits called it one of the most composed takedowns seen on national television. The climax arrived with a phrase so simple, so precise, that it encapsulated the entire struggle, the assertion of dignity over bluster, of reason over theatrics, of calm over chaos. The studio, for a heartbeat, existed in perfect silence, the weight of the moment palpable. Conway's eyes darted, searching for any sign of recovery, but there was none. She had been outmaneuvered without raising a single voice. Crockett had transformed the debate into a lesson in restraint, precision, and the undeniable force of preparation married to principle. By the time Crockett concluded, the audience understood the significance of what had just occurred. This was not a fleeting viral moment, it was a defining display of integrity, composure, and skill. Conway slumped slightly, her face a mixture of disbelief and frustration, while Crockett's calm radiated across every frame, every screen, a silent assertion of victory that needed no applause. And as the cameras lingered on the two figures, capturing the final, electric stillness, the viewers at home knew they had witnessed something remarkable. The debate had been won, not with theatrics, but with truth, focus, and unshakable dignity. What happened next was bigger than just one TV exchange, it was an online earthquake. The moment Crockett's words landed, the world outside the studio erupted. Social media feeds ignited with an intensity that could only be described as viral combustion. Hashtags praising her composure began trending within minutes. Hashtag calm over chaos, hashtag Crockett wins, hashtag mic drop moment. They flooded timelines across platforms, each one a testament to viewers who recognized the power of restraint over rage. Every clip of Conway's faltering aggression was shared side by side with Crockett's measured responses, creating a stark contrast that became the defining visual of the evening. Memes appeared almost instantly. Conway's exaggerated expressions were captioned with mockery, the very theatrics she had relied on now serving as fodder for humor. Meanwhile, Crockett's calm, poised presence became a symbol, celebrated not for spectacle, but for strength and dignity. People tagged friends, shared screenshots, and commented in awe of her ability to remain unshaken in the face of such relentless provocation. The conversation was no longer about policy points or partisan lines, it was about character, integrity, and the courage to stand unyielding. Celebrities, journalists, and political commentators weighed in, amplifying the impact. Influencers dissected her phrasing, pointing out the calculated timing, the moral clarity, and the sheer power of her restraint. Former lawmakers and public figures praised her ability to speak truth without descending into theatrics, framing her reply as a masterclass in leadership and composure. Even late-night shows referenced the moment, replaying clips as if to remind the public of what leadership, courage, and dignity looked like in real time. The ripple effect spread across news cycles. Analysts debated the significance of the exchange, contrasting it with decades of televised political confrontations. Many argued that the spectacle of shouting and interruption had dominated too long, and Crockett's calm yet devastating reply had shifted the paradigm. Conway, once a symbol of televised dominance, was now scrutinized for her reliance on volume over substance. Clips of her faltering gestures and tense expressions circulated endlessly, fueling commentary on the limits of aggression in public discourse. At the local level, constituents shared the moment widely, tagging Crockett's office and expressing pride in her representation. Community leaders praised her not only for her performance but for what it represented, the triumph of dignity, intellect, and composure over bluster and intimidation. Social validation extended beyond amusement, it became a shared cultural reference point, a story that viewers felt compelled to retell. People began framing their own lives and struggles against the backdrop of Crockett's example, seeing in her a model of perseverance and grace under fire. Even casual viewers, who might not follow politics closely, engaged. They discussed the exchange in coffee shops, in online forums, and in living rooms. The debate had transcended the boundaries of television, becoming a national talking point. Conversations pivoted from partisan lines to admiration for poise, strategy, and the ability to command respect without aggression. The story of Crockett versus Conway was no longer just an argument, it was a narrative of heroism in the modern political arena. Yet amidst the memes, hashtags, and viral clips, something subtler but equally significant was taking place. People were beginning to see the power of restraint, of choosing one's words with care, and the influence of calm confidence in shaping public perception. Conway's collapse under her own theatrics was amplified precisely because Crockett had refused to meet her at the level of chaos. In every shared clip, in every trending post, viewers were witnessing a new kind of victory, one where patience and principle outweighed volume and intimidation. The world had reacted, agreed, and celebrated. Crockett was praised as a voice of reason, Conway mocked as a relic of overconfidence. Social media had done what television alone could not. It had immortalized the moment, broadcast it to millions, and cemented Crockett's reply as a defining example of modern political poise. But beneath the laughter, something deeper was happening. The resonance of Crockett's calm was more than just a viral moment, it was a revelation. Millions watched and felt the power of composure, the quiet authority that comes from knowledge, preparation, and moral conviction. In a world accustomed to outrage, shouting, and spectacle, her measured words reminded the audience of a deeper truth: dignity and integrity carry far more weight than volume and aggression. Crockett's triumph was symbolic as much as it was practical. She had not merely bested an opponent, she had embodied a principle that transcends politics: the ability to remain grounded in one's values, even when provoked by chaos. It was a lesson in restraint, showing that true power lies not in overwhelming others with noise, but in the quiet confidence of reason and truth. Her calm wasn't passivity, it was strategy, courage, and clarity all at once. The impact extended beyond the debate stage. Americans saw themselves reflected in her patience and steadfastness. For immigrant communities, for marginalized voices, for anyone who had ever been underestimated or dismissed, Crockett's demeanor served as validation. She was proof that history favors those who stand firm, who answer arrogance not with matching anger, but with focused determination and intellect. It was a moment that gave people permission to believe that civility and reason are not weaknesses, but weapons of influence and respect. Moreover, Crockett's approach highlighted a fundamental craving in the American psyche: the desire for leaders who exemplify grace under fire. The country had grown weary of bombast, manipulation, and theatrical posturing. In her measured responses, viewers found inspiration and hope. They saw that leadership is not defined by who can shout the loudest, but by who can listen, think, and respond with clarity and conscience. It was a reaffirmation of values that resonate universally: honesty over deceit, service over self-interest, and composure over chaos. The moral clarity of the moment was undeniable. Conway's theatrics had faltered precisely because they lacked substance. Her arrogance, her attempts to dominate through aggression, only magnified the power of Crockett's calm. The contrast could not have been clearer: one side reliant on intimidation, the other anchored in principle. It was a cinematic lesson in human behavior, a reminder that truth, patience, and integrity inevitably prevail over manipulation and fear. Audiences absorbed this lesson not just with their eyes, but with their hearts. The applause, the social media praise, the admiration from peers and commentators, it all reflected a collective understanding that something profound had occurred. Crockett's reply became more than a debate victory, it became a cultural touchstone, a shared story that reinforced the power of dignity and the enduring value of composure. In the end, the moment wasn't simply about political points or personal reputation. It was about a vision of America where leadership is measured by integrity, courage, and respect for truth. It was about showing that even in the most heated environments, grace can triumph over anger, patience can outweigh aggression, and character can outshine theatrics. Crockett's performance illuminated a path forward, reminding the nation that principled calm is more enduring than any fleeting outburst. And that's why this moment will be remembered long after the cameras turned off. Kellyanne Conway screamed. She yelled, she shouted, she tried to dominate the conversation with fury and theatrics. But across the table, Jasmine Crockett remained unshaken. Her calm, measured, and precise reply did more than silence her opponent, it went viral, capturing the attention of millions and proving that dignity, composure, and truth can triumph over aggression and chaos. This wasn't just a debate. It was a demonstration of values in action. Crockett showed the nation that leadership is not about who can yell the loudest or command the most attention, but about who can stand firm in principle, deliver truth with clarity, and maintain grace under pressure. She transformed a tense television segment into a lesson that resonates far beyond politics, reminding us all that composure and moral courage are forces that inspire, influence, and endure. If this moment resonates with you, if you believe that calm truth should always prevail over chaos and rage, then you have a role to play. Share this video with your friends, family, and communities. Subscribe to this channel to stay part of stories that celebrate integrity, courage, and dignity. Be part of the movement that values principle over performance, substance over spectacle, and calm leadership over furious noise. The lesson is simple, yet powerful: dignity wins. Truth endures. Composure commands respect. And together, we can amplify voices like Crockett's, voices that show the world what leadership, grace, and courage truly look like.